The title today of our message is Have a Break, Have a KitKat. Let's say that together. Have a break, have a KitKat. Have a break, have a KitKat. All right. Our text is Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 5. Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 5. Then we're going to follow on to Mark chapter 2, verse 27. And then we're going to go on from Mark chapter 2, verse 27, to Matthew chapter 12, verse 5 to 7. I'll explain a bit later why it's going to be like that. But let's start Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 5. Let's read together after 3. On a Sabbath, while he was going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked and ate some heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why are you..." And Jesus answered them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and also gave it to those with him? Said to them, Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Mark chapter 2, verse 27. We're going to read that now, and that is a part of this story. And he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." And then Matthew 12, verses 5 to 7, which is again part of the story. Let's read together. "Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless." All right, let's have a look at our timeline and to see where this event occurs in Jesus' ministry. So we are looking at his year of popularity. And I think that is important for us to note as we begin to walk through our text. Jesus basically is saying what he's saying near the beginning of his ministry. He's still popular. People are still listening to him with great joy. The religious leaders and the political leaders are not quite sure where he's coming from. And in that setting, he brings this tremendous challenge to them. And so you have this sense that people are more open to hearing him at this point than later on in his ministry. And this is where he emphasizes greatly this subject. Are you with me? So we're looking at the synoptic gospels quickly there. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the synoptic gospels, basically, synoptic means seen together. Say seen together. So different authors, many of the same stories, all right, sometimes presented in the same sequence, details vary, but all of that proves the veracity of what Jesus is saying, of what actually happened. So, for example, I can look at this Bible, and I can describe to you how I see this Bible, all right? And I will be correct, but it's coming from my perspective. Laurie could stand up and then describe my Bible, and he will describe it from his perspective. It would be correct, all right? Now, when you just hear me, you've just got one perspective. But if you hear me and Laurie, you have got two people's perspective of the same thing, which gives you a more complete picture. And that's what's occurring in these Gospels. Now, our text says that Jesus, on a Sabbath day, is walking with his disciples through some fields where grain is growing, and feeling peckish, they decide to grab some ears of grain and rub it in their hands like this, and then pop it into their mouth. Reasonable? Yeah? You're hungry, you need feeding, you do what you can to feed yourself. And they are beasted by religious leaders who happened to be watching them. And they are told that what they're doing is illegal because it is occurring on the Sabbath. And Jesus says, no, it's not. So why was it illegal? What was illegal that they were doing? What was illegal in what they were doing? Where were they breaking the law?
The rubbing of their hands together was considered work.
Okay, so it's the rubbing of their hands together. Not the eating, but the rubbing of their hands. On the Sabbath, the religious leaders of the day said you couldn't rub your hands together like that. That was seen as work. You could only walk, because that's a grinding action. So you could only walk a certain amount of yards. And if you went over those certain amount of yards on the Sabbath, you were guilty of breaking the Sabbath law. All right? So they had loads of restrictions and loads of laws to try and help people to keep the Sabbath in the way that they understood it should have been kept. And so, but Jesus says to them, you're wrong. And he quotes to them the precedent set by King David in the Old Testament. Now, it's interesting when we read the Gospels that what we see is that Jesus does a lot of healing. He does a lot of stuff on the Sabbath day. All right. And this continues throughout his ministry, and it infuriates the religious leaders. They go absolutely ballistic. And also the synagogue leaders also don't like it as well. And in one incident we read of Jesus healing somebody on the Sabbath in the synagogue. The synagogue, if you like, is the church. And this religious leader says, the leader of the synagogue says, if you want to be healed, come in the other days of the week, not on the Sabbath. Not when we gather in the synagogue to read God's word and to be taught from God's word. You can't be healed then. Make sense? This so infuriated the religious leaders, Jesus healing people on the Sabbath, that it was one of the reasons that they wanted to kill him. What's the second reason? There are two reasons. What's the second reason? Sorry? Because he claimed that God was his father, therefore he was equal to God, therefore God. All right? That was the second reason they wanted him killed. Now, to understand the religious leaders' reaction to how Jesus was operating on the Sabbath, we need to know what the Sabbath is. And so, let's teach one another what the Sabbath is, and what was done on the Sabbath, and what was not done on the Sabbath, and why it was so important. What do you know about the Sabbath?
One of the 10 Commandments, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Okay, so it was a day that was meant to be kept holy. Seemed to be kept more holy than any other day. To be holy means to be set apart. So it was a day that was set apart and to be seen as a special day, a godly day. Anything else, please, about the Sabbath? What was it? What was to happen on that day?
It was supposed to be a day of holy convocation, which means that it was set apart for the people of God to gather together, which showed that they were set apart for him, unlike any of the other nations.
Okay, so it was a day where the people were supposed to gather together and to be together with God. And it was a day that was different to other nations, the surrounding nations. It was something peculiar to God's people. Yes, Marina?
It's a day where people and their animals rested from their normal labor.
It's a day when people and animals were to rest from their normal labor, the normal activity of the day. Yes?
To abstain from making a living.
To abstain from making a living. Yep.
Making money.
To making money on that day. So that day was not about making money. Different day to every other day. So the slogan, have a break, have a KitKat, is a slogan that KitKat used, came into being from 1957. And it was to encourage people to take a break and enjoy a KitKat as a way to unwind and recharge. Say unwind and recharge. And they were saying that this is important for our mental and physical well-being. It also meant to convey that a KitKat bar can provide a short break from a long working day. All right? So it was all about, the slogan was all about the need to have a break from work for our physical and mental well-being. The Sabbath is a gift from God to us so that we have a good work-life balance. It's a day when we're supposed to rest from working for money, which is necessary to live. The Ecclesiastes says, wine is to make the heart glad. Food is, I can't remember what that's for, but you need food or you can't live. And money is for everything. You need money to operate. But the Sabbath day was a day given so that we could have a rest. And from that, it was a day that God's saying that we're supposed to gather together to be refreshed by the Word of God. Gather together to pray. Gather together to laugh. Gather together to socialize. To refresh our human relationships, which are life-giving. A day that we take time to remember who Jesus is and who we are. A day to eat, keep saying that, don't I? A day to drink. And a day to make sure that all, say that with me, all, that all people have what is pertaining to life. That's not work, but life-giving service. Now, in our nation, we're really blessed. We actually pay people, or can pay people, to give life-giving service. And many nations in the world can't do that, but we can, and that's so good. Even the Jewish leaders began to realize that it was necessary to maintain animal and human life on the Sabbath day. And I wonder whether they began to realize that because of Jesus' activity. You see, the Sabbath day was given as a day of rest. a day of rest. God created the earth 6 days, and on the seventh he rested. And God knows, therefore, how rest is needful. How rest is needful so that we can flourish. And so God says, on the seventh day, you rest. You rest. And Jesus was really concerned that people enjoyed the Sabbath. They enjoyed the rest day. To enjoy the rest day, it meant that their needs needed to be met. So if they were hungry, they needed to be fed. If they were sick, they needed to be healed. If animals needed to be fed, they had to be fed. The Word of God had to be taught on that day. Because as well as needing physical food, we need spiritual food as well. Because we're body, soul, and spirit, are we not? And also, Jesus wanted the humanity to gather together on that day. Because we are his offspring. And you see, there's something occurs when we do these things on the day of rest, which is dynamic and vitally important for well-being. Not only for our personal well-being, but for the well-being of our community. Not only for the well-being of our community, but the well-being of our nation. And boy, do we not need some input regarding the well-being of our nation, with the backdrop of all the things that are happening today. In other words, these things that we do on the Sabbath makes this day become an oasis. An oasis which has an effect, and it has the effect which is significant, life-changing, like a man seeking to navigate a desert. Or as Laura talked about the other day, last week, desolate places. An oasis is a place where you can rest. An oasis is a place where you can be replenished. An oasis is a place where you can drink. An oasis is a place which will give you hope and strength in a desert or in desolate places, as we heard last week. So how are oases formed? Oases are irrigated by natural springs or underground water supplies. The water makes the land fertile, allowing plants to grow. It's a place where things grow and happen because there's water flowing. It reminds me of what Jesus says, whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of their heart will flow rivers of living water. Let's have that scripture up, please. Whoever believes in me, out of their heart will flow rivers of living water. Rivers of life-giving water. John chapter 7, verse 38. So what Jesus is saying here is that if we've got a picture here, that if we believe in Jesus, if I believe in Jesus, if you believe in Jesus, if we all believe in Jesus, then rivers of living water, of life-giving water, is going to flow from our hearts. So when we gather together as the people of God on the Sabbath day, and we are reading the word together, and we are praying together, and we are worshiping together, and we are eating together, and we are drinking together, and we are socializing together, and we are hanging out together, and we are helping together people who need, and by giving them things that are necessary, are needful for them to live, rivers of living water is flowing from our hearts and coming together to create an oasis in which people can come and drink and live. That's what's supposed to be happening on that day that God has given us to rest. Now, I find it significant that Jesus does so much healing and makes so many big statements on the Sabbath day. The first thing, let's look at this one. If we look at from Luke chapter 6, verse 6 onwards, we read of the story of a guy who's got a withered hand. All right, his right hand is withered, and he's in the synagogue, which, if you like, is the church. And the scribes and the Pharisees are watching to see whether Jesus will heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might find a reason to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts, and he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come and stand here." Notice that. Jesus says, come off the back there, leave family, right, and come and stand here. He brings him to the forefront. He brings him into people's attention. He causes everybody in church, in the synagogue, in church, to focus on him on the Sabbath day. Are you with me so far? And so he comes and he stands there. And Jesus says to everybody, "I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to destroy it?" And everybody's silent. The religious leaders are silent. The people are silent. Everyone's silent. They're just looking at Jesus. Now, I find it very interesting to note Jesus' response to this silence. We don't get his response in the Gospel of Luke, but if we go quickly over to the Gospel of Mark, we will read of Jesus' response to their silence. And it's this. It says that he looked around at them with anger, grieved at the hardness of their heart. He looked around at them with anger, grieved at the hardness of their heart. That's important for us to note as we're trying to understand what's going on in this story. Jesus is not happy. He's not happy at the fact that they don't want this guy healed on the Sabbath day. He is not happy with their attitude towards this guy, that they'd rather he remain ill, remain broken, remain sad on this Sabbath day, which God has given to humanity as a day of rest. He's not happy at their indifference. He's not happy in the way that they are thinking regarding this ill person. He's not happy regarding how they are viewing people who are ill. He's not happy that they do not want to change this person's life for the better. He's so not happy, he's angry. Because if there's any day that somebody should be made better, if there's any day that somebody should be healed, if there is any day that the people of God should stop to improve somebody's life, it is on the day that the Lord has given us to rest, the Sabbath day. And Jesus healed him in front of them. And the religious leaders leave and scurry away and meet up with political leaders to plot to kill Jesus. Jesus, it's on the Sabbath day. He knew what was going to happen on this day. And notice there, this is another Sabbath day. And so, and another Sabbath day, we've got the disciples walking through. He knew they'd be hungry. He probably was hungry. And he knew that they would pick the grain and rub it in their hands and eat it. He probably joined in with them. He's the rabbi. He's their leader. So he took the lead, and they would fall in line. Why? Why is he doing this? He's doing it because he's saying that on this day, nobody should be hungry. On this day, no one should know lack. On this day, no one should be suffering. On this day, there should be hope for every single person. On this day, there should be life. On every day, there should be life. But on this day, this is a sign. This day is a sign. The Sabbath is a sign regarding what the whole of life should be like. And so he led them in getting in trouble, into getting in trouble. And then on another day, on another Sabbath day, he's walking through and he sees a whole load of invalids waiting for the stirring of the waters to be healed. And there's this guy who's been an invalid for 38 years. We don't know actually how long he was there for, but he was there for a long time. And Jesus comes across him and says, right, do you want to be healed? And he looks at Jesus, like I said the other day, and says, well, of course, I'm here. And I've been here a long time. But every time the waters stir, somebody else gets in before me and they get healed. You may ask, why did it happen that way? Well, they believed that an angel would come down at certain times, stir the water, first person got in would get healed. And so that's what all these invalid people were waiting for, the stirring of the waters. But this guy wasn't quick enough to get in. Jesus looks at him and says, do you want to be healed? And the guy says yes. And Jesus heals him. And he says, pick up your bed and go home. Guess what? The religious leaders saw him. They seem to be everywhere, watching, spying on Jesus and his activity. And they see this guy healed, and they see him carrying his stuff out. And they go up to him and said, you can't carry that stuff, it's the Sabbath. What are you doing? He says, Jesus told me to do it. What was all that about? It's Jesus saying to us, on the day of the Sabbath, you can put down your burdens. You should be able to put down the things that worry you. You should be able to put down the things that stress you. You should put down those things that are a burden to you, that are pressing you down, that speak of death and not life, that speak of pain and not healing, that speak of sorrow and not joy. You can put those down on the Sabbath day. To put them down on the Sabbath day, on this special day, to take them up on the day after? No. But God, what are you saying to them? He's saying, this is the day where you can remember what life is all about, where you can remember what God's heart is for you as a people, and demonstrate God's heart to one another, and go in the strength of that into the rest of the week. Jesus saying, the day is a day of rest and of freedom for you. I want to say to you this, and I really didn't want to preach on the Sabbath, because I knew that some of you, as soon as you've heard me preach on Sabbath, you say, oh, he's there again. Here he goes again. He bangs on about the Sabbath. Every few months he bangs on about it. And you're absolutely right. And I said, Lord, I don't want to go there again. But I felt constrained by the Holy Spirit to go there again, because what we need to understand is this, that God has given us a day of rest which is supposed to represent who he is and what he has done for us and what he wants us to do and to be like and to live, so that people who are in desolate places, people who are in dry places, people who are in painful places, who are looking for an oasis, can look to the church of God in a village, a church of God in the town, a church of God in the city, a church of God in the nation, and say, I can go there and get what I need to get to live. And there's no other people in our nation who are called to be an oasis but the church of Jesus Christ. There's no other people in our area that are called to be an oasis but the church of Jesus Christ. And I love Nigel Clark's story about not being allowed to kick leaves on the Sabbath. You know, I like the story because it points to what you should be able to do. You should be able to have fun on the Sabbath. You should be able to laugh on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is made for enjoyment, not restriction, not pain, not suffering. And when the people of God come together, on the Sabbath, there's something occurs that in fact you cannot necessarily say physically, but it occurs spiritually. How many of you realize that you cannot see with your eyes everything that happens and is necessary for life in this world? Why? Because we are spiritual beings as well. But, you know, how many of you can see an atom with your eye? No. How can you, you see a proton with your eye? Help me, Amanda, here, please. Amanda Turner. How many of you can see, I don't know, all these little things, that the physicists and the scientists tell us are there? We can't see it, but it's there, and if we didn't have them there, we wouldn't have life, would we, Charlotte? We wouldn't have life. I tell you in the name of Jesus Christ that those who call upon the name of the Lord, those who are hungry and thirsty, turn to the Lord. From their hearts, rivers of living water flow. And when we come together, 100+ of us, rivers of living water is flowing out from us. And you might not be able to see the water like you can see the sea if you go down to the promenade. But in the Spirit, this rivers of living water flowing, and God from us, and God is Spirit, and anybody who's looking for God and they're saying that I want to be spiritual and I want to walk in the Spirit and I want to walk in the ways of the Spirit because God is Spirit, they will sense the rivers of living water flowing from us. They'll sense the mighty waves flowing through us. They'll sense the ocean that's flowing out of water powerfully through us. And they begin to come and say, I want to be in your midst. When I got saved, when I was 13, I was in a meeting in a Methodist church, and the rivers were flowing. It was full of people who loved Jesus, and the rivers were flowing. And I felt it. I felt it in my spirit. I was overcome with the power of God. And I began to drink. And I yielded my life to Jesus Christ. And suddenly I knew what he wanted me to do with my life. Rivers. For those who are to be saved, or those who are supposed to become followers of Jesus, those who will respond to what Jesus Christ did on the cross, they need to know where to come. That's how Jesus has set it up. They need to find an oasis in a dry and thirsty land so that they can come and live. You see, life is more than the accumulation of money. Money is necessary to live, isn't it? But life is more than that. It has to be. people who are really wealthy can be miserable. So that points to the fact that life is more than money. Human beings, we're not made to be money machines. We're not made to be workaholics, but we're made to be children of God. Humanity is the offspring of God. And in God, we're supposed to live and move and have our being. We have been designed by Jesus to be an oasis so that human flourishing is enabled. And we would neglect the Sabbath day at our peril. I don't care whether some people think it's a Friday, or in some parts of the world they gather to worship, like in Egypt on a Friday, and some parts of the world gather on a Wednesday or whatever. Whatever works within the nation, you've got to do it. Our day is Sunday. All right. And we neglect it at our peril. We need to be showing this area how to live. How to live. And you say, well, I can do that in the week, and when I'm at work, and I can speak to people in the week and so on. Yes, you can. And I can do it when I'm doing my hobby. Yes, I can. And because rivers of living water are flowing from me, because, therefore I can be an oasis to them, because when I meet them and so on. Yes, you can. But why do we love it when at a football match or at a rugby match or at the swimming gala in the Olympics, when there are tens of thousands of people to gather together, 60, 70, 80,000 people roaring and cheering and supporting the competitors, does it not make your hairs on the back of your neck come alive? Don't you feel the energy and the excitement? Being there is one thing. Watching it on TV is one thing, but being there is another. Something is being released in the atmosphere which is life-changing. It changes how people feel and how people think at that moment. And they're having a great time and they're on a high, but when they leave that change is gone because it's not eternal. Well, when we come together as the people of God, and we gather together, a synergistic effect occurs. My river, not my spring, but my river combines with Jennifer's. Jennifer's combines with Michelle. Michelle's combines with Carolyn. Carolyn combines with Amanda. Amanda's river combines with Roger's. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so this river gets bigger and stronger and wider and more powerful. And a message is released into a dry and weary land that says there is an oasis which is open to all, and you can come and drink and have everlasting life. You can meet the God who died for you because he loves you and will forgive you all your sins, and he will heal you, and he'll feed you, and he'll watch over you, and he'll cause you to be full of hope and give you purpose and joy in your life. It's here. He's in our midst. Come and meet us. This is what our area needs. And the enemy has worked so hard at undermining our opportunity to gather together. And we need to see what he's doing. He's trying to get rid of the oasis. And if he gets rid of the oasis, then people will be dry and die of thirst. Is that what we want? I praise God the people that with whom I got saved did not want that. And so I leave you with this. Dan Walker. Anybody heard of Dan Walker? TV presenter. He says this: I'm very happy with my decision not to work on a Sunday. Despite missing out on some amazing jobs, prioritizing faith and family has worked for me.
What you're saying is right, Charles.
Thank you, Harley.
Yeah, I agree. But there are certain things I don't agree, that I have to be honest with you. When people say that they got joy in Jesus' Spirit and that, yes, that is very true. But what about convictions?
Are you on about convictions again? You can't get away from that, can you?
No, I'm coming from convictions because I've been convicted quite a few times. He was happy what I was doing, but he didn't approve it. What I did was right, but it was wrong in his eyes.
Right.
So basically, I've got to change
Yeah.
everything from my attitude, finances, business finances, because I can't hide anything from him because he sees it. Now, it's not funny, but it's painful. No, but it is bloody painful.
Yeah.
But I've got to change my attitude with the new job that I've got.
Yeah.
He said that I'm allowed to do generosity when the time is right.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes down to tithe, I struggle with that. And I'll be honest with you, I have been doing it properly now because God sees everything. But deep down, I know that I'll be honoured by it.
Yes. And so, sometimes drinking at the Oasis is a challenge because we have to repent of things that aren't right and so that we can live. And so Jesus challenges us, our thinking and the ways that we operate. And sometimes it isn't nice being in the water. I don't like cold water. I only get into the sea when it's 27 degrees. So that's when I'm in the Caribbean or on the west side of Africa, okay? But you say that the cold water can be good for you. But sometimes, it's like that sometimes when people come, they have to let go of stuff that is not good for them. They think it's good, but God says, no, I've got something better for you. And so, just drinking from the well isn't always easy. There is a challenge there too. Being amongst God's people isn't always easy, but there's a challenge. But the challenge is necessary for us to come into the better. All right.